Hello, everyone. If you're watching me right now, then you're either a boat rental operator or you want to be a boat rental operator. My name is Chris Johnsen. I'm an attorney with Johnsen Law, and I'm here today to talk to you about the importance of a legal framework, policies, contracts, and safety measures in your boat rental operating business. So let's begin. I like to call this presentation Smooth Sailing Legal and Compliance Essentials for Boat Rental Operators. First, I want to start with the legal entity framework. I suggest at a minimum forming 3 entities for a boat rental operating business. One would be the boat rental operating company, the operational company. 2 would be the boat owning company, the company that would actually own the boats. And then there would be a holding company on top of those 2 companies, which would own those companies, and the holding company would be owned by you, the individual. Now, if there's more than one individual owners of one or more of these companies, then you're definitely going to want an operating agreement in place. And that operating agreement should be custom tailored to your desires with respect to what I like to call the 3 legs of the stool. And that is restrictive covenants, operating and control provisions, and transfer restrictions. Don't just pull something off the shelf, because those 3 areas of the stool are really important, and it's really important to have a custom crafted operating agreement that suits your needs not only now, but in the future. Next, we're going to discuss online checkout policies. You're going to need a streamlined policy agreement process with checkboxes. I love checkboxes, and I'm going to mention that multiple times during this presentation. The online checkout policies should include some key terms. Let's go over some of those key terms. There are rental terms, such as the duration of the rental, the cost of the rental, pickup and return times. There are eligibility requirements, such as a minimum age, ID requirements, maybe depending on the state, a voting license requirement, safety regulation provisions, which would include a reference to the mandatory safety orientation, which we'll discuss next. Usage restrictions for the boat, such as no beaching the boat or driving the boat in inclement weather or bow riding on the boat. There's also going to be reference to the liability waivers, which we'll discuss next, and optional insurance and the importance of getting optional insurance. There's also going to be an optional damage waiver, which would limit the boat owner's responsibility to the actual physical damage of the boat. That could be purchased at an optional fee, but otherwise they need to know and acknowledge that they're going to be fully responsible for any physical damage to the boat. There's going to be checkboxes about the equipment that's being provided and that it needs to be returned in usable condition, instructions for using the equipment, as well as emergency procedures, which we'll also discuss later, and then the privacy policy. After they check the boxes, acknowledging all the different provisions and signing the agreement, you're going to want to make sure they have a copy of that sent to them by email. I mentioned the liability waivers. So anyone that goes on this boat, including children, in that case, the parent would sign on behalf of the children, they need to sign a liability waiver. Liability waivers, again, shouldn't be pulled off the shelf. They need to be custom tailored to include all the risks inherent in the activity in depth, or else you could face a situation where a court voids your liability waiver. So what's the point of even having it if a court's going to void it? So take the time up front to think through the activity and what the renter's going to do, what kind of assumptions of risk that they're engaging in, and you need to have them acknowledge that all these risks are inherent in this activity, and that's going to make it more likely that this liability waiver is actually going to be upheld by a court, which is what you want. I mentioned the damage waivers before. So this is to limit damage to the boat. It has nothing to do with personal liability for either the renter or if they harm somebody else. It just relates to the physical condition of the boat. It's an optional fee in which if they pay that, then they might be liable up to a certain amount, like $500, $1,000. After that, they're not liable anymore. I prepared a form damage waiver. It's pretty simple, and I would want to tweak it some more if we were going to use it in any of your operations, but I wanted something to share with you. If you want a copy, email firm@johnsenlaw.com, JOHNSEN law.com. Put in the subject line, smooth sailing damage waiver, and I'll go ahead and send you a copy. I also mentioned previously the insurance offering. There are options available through reputable providers, and you want to use those. One reputable provider is Buoy, BUOY. And then there's VQuip, VQUIP. Whether or not they're actually going to buy insurance, you should still highlight the benefits of insurance and also just promote safe boating practices, which leads into the next topic, which is the safety orientation and the education. So I recommend developing a state-approved safety orientation program, which oftentimes involves a video, perhaps a 30-minute video that the renters watch, and then they have to take a test on later to confirm that they understand what they actually saw. And you also, like I mentioned before, every chance of the way, educate the consumer on key safety practices, whether that's on the website, whether that's in the online checkout policies or in one of the later documents. And it's just instilling this culture in your employees so they're all about safety, and they're about safety with the customers. It's a great compliance standard for you to meet to avoid any liability. Next, you should have a rental launch agreement. This is the agreement that signs when they actually launch the boat. It's going to include a lot of the same provisions that were in the online checkout policies. They just may be restated to be more applicable to actually the launching of the boat and where the renter's at right now in the process. Again, you're going to include check boxes for safety and equipment agreements. It's very important to include photos of the boat's current condition at the time of rental, and have all drivers sign this rental launch agreement. Now, when you return the boat, when the renter returns the boat, there's going to be return documentation. There should be check boxes acknowledging that all the equipment's been returned, that the boat's in good working order, that the equipment's in good working order, attaching photos of the boat's condition at the time of return, and then also leaving sections for the renter to provide feedback, either on the boat's performance or the equipment or anything else with their experience. It's very important to maintain your equipment. It needs to be working if the renter needs it. So there should be checklists developed for routine maintenance. That would include inspecting boats, motors, safety equipment, things along those lines, making sure that if any flares are on board, that they're not expired, making sure that the sound devices are in good working order, and then keeping records of routine maintenance repairs and customer feedback so you have those documents. God forbid, if something happens later, you can show that you did due diligence in making sure that everything was in good working order. Emergency preparedness is also important. It's important to anticipate, depending on where you are and the conditions that are present, anticipate potential emergency situations that can arise. And then for each of those potential emergency situations, have a written plan in place that is available to the renter, that's given to the renter, that they acknowledge, and that also your employees know about, because there should also be a staff member and perhaps even a designated boat available if you need to engage in an emergency response. I know I covered a lot in about 10-minute period of time. If you want to discuss any of these things in more detail, there's a few ways to get a hold of me. You can email firm@johnsenlaw.com. That's JOHNSEN law. You can also go straight to my Calendly link, which is calendly.com/Chris Johnsen, JOHNSEN. you could go to the scheduling widget on the website, which is www.johnsonlaw.com, or you can scan this QR code with your phone and you can schedule an appointment there. Thanks for your time. I hope this was helpful.